Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
All right, Josh, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm super pumped to have you back. Our last conversation was definitely, I don't know when exactly it got published. I know it's out now. I can't remember if it made it into last year or this year, but it was definitely my favorite episode we recorded last year.
So, I mean, you flatter me. Thank you. It was a pleasure to do it. I had so much fun. So it's great to be able to get another bite at the apple.
Of course. And this one is particularly meaty. We're talking about how to book a meeting over email. So we're going to talk a little bit about some theory. We're going to talk about sort of the context of the email, and we're going to get into some tactics. And so I'm excited because I could talk for days about this. It's not often, like I talk to people every week about how to do this and how to do that. And it's very common to get people with blog post level knowledge of, you should do this, you should do that. It's not often I can like push and pull with a guest and they're like, wherever I go, they could go a layer deeper. And that's where I think we're going to get to with Josh. And so that's why I'm pumped with this one. So when we talk about email and specifically booking meetings over email, let's talk about the theory. So I know you have some thoughts here. Where should we start?
Yeah. I'd say the first thing I always tell anybody I've hired and I'm training, or somebody comes to me and they're asking for advice on how to grow your business, especially over email. It's like, what is your goal? I think we have a tendency to think that the goal is to make a sale. And that's not the goal. Not over email. That's the ultimate goal later, right? But your goal is really to initiate the conversation and to book a meeting. That's your goal. And so, and to get a meeting, like, how do you do that, right? You need to make sure that you are delivering something valuable and interesting. And the way I kind of think about it, like in theory, is I make an analogy to a trailer for a movie. A really good movie trailer gives you just enough that you understand what the movie is about. You know who the actors are, right? You know what the genre is, but it doesn't give away the whole plot. A really bad movie trailer, you watch it and you're like, I got the whole movie. Like the twist was in it, like the whole thing. I don't need to go to the theater. So if we make that analogy into a sales email, like how to work your way into closing deals via email, you want to write the equivalent of a great movie trailer in your email. And that is going to lead you to the conversation. And then, your other sales skills will lead you, hopefully, to the close one.
I think I love the movie trailer idea. The piece that you said first was, and I'm summarizing and I might be adding in from our pre-interview, was your first goal is not to book a meeting. Your first goal is to sort of establish yourself as,
right.
I hesitate to call it a relationship, but let's be generous. You're establishing a relationship, maybe in name only. They may not reply to you, but they at least recognize, hey, this Josh person who's sending me an email isn't an idiot. And they're not just going to bomb me with book a meeting, book a meeting, book a meeting, book a meeting. And that's a relationship, so to speak. And right. I love that you're thinking about it two different ways. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that? Because I think it's a huge piece that a lot of people miss when they're first writing the email copy.
Yeah, of course. And this is like a classic move of mine to talk about it one way and then talk about it another way. But both are true. So yes, you're there to establish a relationship. And what I always think about is like, you have to understand the mathematics of what you're doing. Let's say you do a really, really good job of prospecting and building a prospect list of your people in your ideal customer profile. And I can give a real world example if I can ever get the eyelash out of my eye. So there's a period of time where I owned an accounting company and we did bookkeeping and accounting for marketing agencies. So my ICP was really straightforward. It was agency owners or owners of marketing agencies. And then to start out, I decided I was just going to do California. So that's a pretty narrow list. It's fairly straightforward for me to build that list. And the thing is, at any given time, only about 2% of business owners are looking for a new bookkeeper. So you have to understand that whatever you're selling, And maybe that percentage will vary depending on what it is, but it's somewhere in the single digits. Most likely, people are looking actively for the thing that you have. Those are the people that you're most likely to successfully initiate a relationship with. Your goal shouldn't be to try and sell someone over an email or convince them to talk to you. Your first goal should be, hey, do you need the thing that I have? And that's what I mean by establish a relationship. It should be very straightforward where when you reach out to somebody, what you're doing is, hey, here's who I am. Here's why I'm reaching out to you. Do you need the thing that I have? And if they say yes, then you can go in and say, great, let's talk. And you get that meeting. So yeah, it's not build a relationship in the sense that, you're going to become pen pals and best friends. But it's building a relationship that's a little bit more transactional, but it's at least honest and transparent.
I love that. We actually did some testing back when we were doing Outbound Labs, because with Outbound Labs, we had the advantage we had was email at scale. We were sending tons of emails. So we were able to split test things across a number of customers. And we tested, and we did this with LinkedIn automation as well. We tested I call it the fast pitch of like going right for the sale. And we tested the relevance approach, which is, hey, we're kind of working on this space. Is that relevant to you right now? Is this something that you're thinking about solving? The soft ask one, like hands down. I think it was like triple the rates.
Always. Yeah. And because I kind of do this, like you think about it, like if somebody approaches you on the street and they try and hand you something, your first reaction is like, what? Like, I don't want to take that thing. If somebody asks you a question on the street, you're way more likely to respond. And that's something that we could talk about, when we get into sort of how to actually write an email and what to include and what not to include. I think that same principle comes back there, but it's also true, at this sort of theoretical level as well.
Mm-hmm. I worked in retail sales in high school, and every time I walk into a retail sales store, and I hated people that did this, I would come in and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to find this thing. And I'm working on actually like not being quite this way when I walk in. But my first reaction, they're like, hey, can I help you with anything? I'm like, nope. I just want to get in the store. Like right. I just walked in the store. Give me like 10 seconds to land. And they're like, hey, what are you looking for? I'm like, back off, bud.
I don't know what I'm looking for. Yeah.
And I've specifically walked into the store to buy something, and buy something, usually something specific. I'm not going into like look around. It's like, I need to get ski poles. And they're like, hey, can I help you with anything? I'm like, no. And so I lie to them. Like, and if this happens in reality, when I physically walk somewhere, like imagine how I respond over email.
100%. Yeah. A little bit off topic. I had somebody email me last week, and they had an offer I was interested in. They said, hey, I'm the executive producer of this series. I'd love to feature your company. Are you interested? And I responded and said, how much does it cost? And they responded and said, I won't talk to you I can't tell you over email unless we talk. What they didn't know is I had to submit my budget request that day. So if they had just responded to me and told me how much it cost, I would have included it in my budget request, but they didn't. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's like if somebody, to carry the analogy further, if somebody had, like, to me, that was a win. If I email somebody and I'm like, hey, are you looking for this thing? And they respond, like, how much does it cost? If you walk into a store and they're like, can I help you? And you're like, yeah, I need ski poles. And they're like, I can't show you the ski poles until I show you the shorts. You're like, what? Like, no, that's not how this works. It's not what I'm after.
We got to do a full assessment first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was wild. And they were okay with it. I let them know. I was like, I have to get my budget request. And they're like, well, it's not going to happen then. I was like, okay, bye.
You're the salesperson here, right? Like, I'm trying to.
It was amazing to me.
Yeah, I get a bunch of those, and they're always, oh, we want to feature you, and we're CNBC and this and this and that, and all these like fancy big names. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And I've been, I would say, tricked into taking a few of those calls. And they're like, oh yeah, it's 30 grand. And I'm like, we were planning out a pre-interview. What? Yeah.
Yeah, not worth it.
No, I hate the sneaky sales pitch. Not a fan.
Agreed. Which is why, going back to bring it back to where we started, what is the theory? The theory is to be very straightforward, upfront, establish a relationship. Hey, this is what I have. Do you need it?
Mm-hmm. And I remember the analogy you used in our pre-interview about kind of selling into the C-suite and your experience at Autodesk when you're writing I think you were writing a speech for them.
Yeah, so I used to write keynote speeches for the CEO of Autodesk. And this is like, so going a little bit deeper into theory and starting to get into like actionability as well. So that's the theory of approaching the relationship. I would say the second part of theory is like, how do you actually approach copywriting and the content of your email? And what I've always encouraged people to do, and what I've seen the most success with, is like, you have to understand what is the normal email traffic of the person that you're emailing. What does that look like? And so I always laugh when people sell into the C-suite. They like, so often you're selling into the C-suite. So you're like, okay, this is my one shot. I'm going to put everything in the email. I'm going to write 5 paragraphs, and that's how I'm going to get them. I'm going to explain everything. And they're ignoring the first part of the theory, which is like, that's actually not your job, right? At this point in the process. But what does the email traffic of a CEO look like? I remember as we were writing this keynote speech, he's delivering the speech the next day. He emails us and he's like, I don't like it. Change this thing. And it was a major change. It was like substantial, rewrites. So we crank away for 5 hours. I rewrite a huge portion of the speech. And I emailed back to him. I'm like, I changed everything here. I did this, I did that, I did this. Is this what you wanted? And his response back to me was, yes. That was it. Just one word, right? And so understanding like the email traffic of a CEO, they're so absurdly busy that they're not like, hi, Josh, I hope you're doing well today. The reason I'm reaching out to you is, no, that's not what you're going to get. If you get something, it's yes or no, or I don't like it, or, it's one line. Mm-hmm. So if I'm selling into the C-suite, what I want to make sure is that my email looks like an email that they're going to get from somebody in their normal course of business. So somebody who's good at working with the C-suite will probably know that, like, if I'm going to send an email, my email needs to be incredibly brief and incredibly relevant, and that allows for their one-word response. And that, that carries through into prospecting as well.
Interesting. I think, yeah, I'm just going through and I'm like, how do I respond? And I almost treat, back in the day, the analogy was the BlackBerry. You want to be able to see it on a BlackBerry because that's where the C-suite lives. Now it's more like a Slack message, right? Like, yes, I'm not going to write like, dear first name. Yeah. 3 bullet in my intro segment, 3 bullet points. Sincerely. It's exactly what you're saying.
It's that. I mean, we live in the age of Twitter, right? I don't tweet. I'm not a tweeter, but 144 characters, if you can get it all, I always say, like, the perfect email is 1 sentence. And then that 1 sentence, you can explain who you are, why you're reaching out, and what your ask is. You can almost never write a 1 sentence first email, but if you can, you're going to get a way better result than 10 sentences.
I love that. I used to coach, when I was coaching our people on how to write emails, I would say every word that you put in there costs you $1,000 because that's $1,000 in missed revenue. And so it's wrong. It's incorrect, but it's directionally correct. Of like, if you're going to spend, okay, you got 400 words in there. It's like, well, you better be confident in
100%. I mean, I used to tell people, so at this point in my career, I managed an outreach instance for 60 reps. I've sent hundreds of thousands of emails just myself. I've tested this at scale. And over time, as things have changed, it's like spam blockers and spam filters got better and people got glommed onto the fact that cold email at scale is a thing. Then the number one indicator of a reply to your email across all these factors and across every industry I've worked in is brevity. The shorter it is, the likelier you reply. And that's always been true.
I can't say anymore. I totally agree. What if somebody doesn't reply?
Yeah. So now we can talk a little bit maybe about the structure of a sequence and like approaching the structure from a theoretical perspective. So I get this a lot, especially with people who are either new SDRs or new to prospecting. People will say something that cracks me up. They're like, sales is a numbers game. It's like, yeah, okay. And then they're like, so I'm going to hit the largest number of people, and I'm going to do the thing that allows me to hit the most people in the least amount of time, because sales is a numbers game. That's their justification. And so what that ends up looking like is I'm just going to send an email-only sequence an automated email-only sequence to thousands of people, or I'm going to do a call-only sequence because I have a power dialer or a parallel dialer, and I'm only, I'm going to hit all those people. The reality is calls and emails warm each other up. So even if, and you see this, and people in marketing talk about this a lot, where they're like, I'll run an ad. You won't click on the ad. Instead, you're going to open a new tab in Chrome and you're going to go into Google and you're going to search predictable revenue, right? And
I do this all the time. I
all
open
the
a
time.
Command Shift and I open up a different window unassociated. Yeah.
Right. So, if you could approach this one way, you're like, well, no one clicked on the ad. We shouldn't run ads. Ads are a waste of time. But that's actually not true, right? The same thing happens when you're doing prospecting and you're trying to book a meeting over email. If you email somebody and they don't respond and you call them and you leave a voicemail so they know who you are. And this is another thing, like I know our conversation's about email, but if you're listening to this and you're making calls and you're not leaving a voicemail, you're leaving money on the table. And my last company, and this number is held true more or less, between 17 and 25% of all the meetings I've booked in my career came from a voicemail callback. So
what?
If people call me back on the voicemail, and we can talk about how to leave an incredible voicemail, but if you're not leaving a voicemail, and I get this all the time, they're like, it takes too long. And I'm like, okay, do you not want 25% more meetings? Because, and there's I digress a little bit. The reason why, especially if you're selling to somebody in North America, you have to understand Americans are bombarded with robocalls every day. And going back to this idea of like, I want to look like email traffic that's in the normal course of business for my buyer. I want to look like phone call traffic that's also in the normal course of business for my buyer. What's not in the normal course of business? A call from a random number that I don't know, or even worse, when they're like, I'm going to use your area code. I'm like, dude, I'm from San Antonio. I live in San Francisco. I know everybody in San Antonio who I know, they're in my phone. I know I don't know you. Like, the one way to get around that is to leave a voicemail and to explain who you are. These things warm each other up. So if you call, they don't respond, and then you call and you email them and you leave, and you do all three of those things, and then you go do a LinkedIn touch, you're going to get overall over the course of your sequence a much higher reply rate than if you only do calls or you only do emails or you only do LinkedIn.
What are your thoughts on, if we can sidebar for a minute, power dialers, parallel dialers? If you're using a tool like Orem or FrontSpan, or I can't remember, there's one in Vancouver. It used to be called Zen Call. They changed their name. Using one of these, you're making 300 calls a day. You're leaving 300 voicemails? Because if you're calling the same person every day, if they're in that call list, are you leaving them a voicemail every day, twice a day?
Yeah. Okay. So with Orem specifically, you can have it leave you a voicemail for you automatically. Man, there's so much here. I'll tell you the best performing voicemail. The best performing voicemail, this is hilarious, it's literally, hey, this is Josh. Give me a call back. Here's my number. And it's the same kind of concept for the email. It's that I'm not trying to sell you over voicemail. I'm trying to establish a relationship. And I'll often say like, hey, this is Josh. I sent you an email. Call me back. Here's my number. That's why these things warm each other up, right? And if you do a good job with the tone of voice, a lot of times people will think that they know you. And they're like, it's Josh. And they'll call you back. You're like, hey, Josh, I missed your call. Like, do we know each other? And you're like, hell yeah, we do. I've been emailing you. Let's chat, or whatever. And you can just parlay that. But okay, to answer your question directly, you always leave a voicemail on the first call. Always on the first call, for sure. If you're going to call them again later in the day, don't leave a voicemail again. If you're going to call them the next day, don't leave a voicemail again. I would say you want to be leaving a voicemail at least once a week. But my thoughts on power dialers and parallel dialers, like, I'm curious to see where this industry goes, because it's like crack. It reminds me of when I started using outreach.
I thought you were going to say crack.
Yeah, it reminds me of when the first time I used crack. No, when I started using,
going to take a turn.
I was using outreach. I was a beta user. I was like very early on. I was like 2013 or 2014, somewhere in there. So back then, like cold email just worked better. It just did.
Dude,
like
it was nuts.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
It was just like crazy. People were just not the industry, the buyers had not yet experienced the volume of cold email that they do today, and the spam blockers were not on to you like they are now. I think that's where we're at with power dialers. Or with power dialers have been around for a long time. Parallel dialers, I think, are newer, and I think that industry is in that same phase where it's like crack. It's crazy. You get sort of addicted to it. But what people maybe don't understand or don't realize is like the phone providers are going to figure you out eventually. But more than that, that's more of a long-term risk. A short-term risk is that your ICP is not infinite. Your total serviceable market, or what I call it TRAM. This is an acronym I made up: total readily addressable market, which is like phone numbers of people I can pull from Apollo to call today. That is not you as an individual SDR might think, just 40,000 people here. That's a huge list. Well, if you're one SDR on a 20-person team, that's not that many leads per person. If you're calling 300 people a day, I hate to break it to you, you're going to burn your list out. And then what?
Exactly. To your point earlier, sales isn't a numbers game. It's a math game. Because if you're one SDR with 40,000 accounts, hell yeah, send that email. Don't make a call. Go for it, because you can. If you're that same company, but you got 20 SDRs, you better be damn efficient with that outreach.
100%. And this is consistently the most difficult concept that I try and explain to people who are new to sales, or even who've been in sales for a while that are struggling. It's like, no, you're thinking about the numbers game the wrong way. Of course, it's a numbers game. More deals equals more money. But the methodology to getting those deals, that matters, and the details there matter. And you think about highest up in the funnel, the activity that you have at this level, cold emailing or cold calling, who you're putting into your sequence, which we can talk about. That has the biggest effect because it's upstream of every other step in the funnel. And so if you're making a bad decision here, you're going to have like massive ramifications to your end result, which is the amount of revenue that you've closed. And I think it's only, I don't know, for a lot of people, they have to get smacked in the face by the reality of it before they understand it.
And there's what you start with and what you end up with. And I think if you're a founder listening to this, it's a very different set of advice than if you're a sales leader building your go-to-market and you're going to hire 5 SDRs.
Yes. Or you already have 5 and you're going to hire 10 more, right? Like totally. It's different. And we can talk about those distinctions if you like. I feel like I don't know if I took us away from the original.
We took a tram. We took a tram down a hill.
That's right.
Very San Francisco reference for you.
Yes.
Yeah. We were talking about replies, and I think we were going like, what's in a reply? There's the positive replies, neutral, etc. What happens if somebody doesn't reply?
Yeah. So now we're kind of talking about like sequence structure, I think. So I can talk about sort of the way I approach things. It's always better to live to fight or live to email another day. So what you don't want to do in my opinion, is send a huge volume of emails. And I think we talked about this in a previous conversation, which was that like at a certain point, if you've emailed somebody a number of times, to me, it's always been, my cutoff is 3. I don't like to email people more than 3 times in a 6-month period, because if you keep emailing somebody and they don't respond to you, their email provider is going to flag you as a spam. And then you're going to burn that lead. So unless you start playing this game where you're juggling multiple inboxes and you're like, there's a lot you can do there. But the way I like to do this is I have the first email. Then I have, if they don't respond, obviously I call them, I leave a voicemail. 3 days later, 3 work days later, I'll send a second email. The second email is 1 sentence. And it's into the same thread. And that 1 sentence reply is there in order to essentially, like, the copy isn't, hey, I'm just following back, but it's that kind of email. It's like, hey, Colin, I know you're super busy. And what I'll do there is I'll restate the question that I asked at the end of the first email. And we'll talk about that first email structure a lot. So I do a 1 sentence second email. Thing to know, you're going to get more replies on that second email than the first email always. So then if you still don't get a reply, another phone call, LinkedIn touch, whatever you're doing there, 3 days later, your final email. We can talk about what goes into that. So you've got your 3 email touch over the course of, let's call it 3 calendar weeks, which is around, or 3 work weeks, around 21 calendar days. So there's your 30-day period. If they don't respond to you in that time, I then will kick them into a sequence that will start 6 months from now. Because to go back to sales as a numbers game, okay, only 2% of people are looking for the solution that you have at any given time. But the key phrase, at any given time. So there's 2% of people today who are looking for your solution. And in 6 months from now, it's still going to be 2%. But the composition of that 2% is an entirely new group of people because those original 2% already bought their solution. 6 months later, a new set, right? But you have to give enough time for the buying cycle to refresh, if that makes sense. So did that answer your question?
100%. I think what you said last in our pre-interview was there's no and there's no reply.
Yes.
And I think I love that. The thing I wanted to stress is I love that you're resting people for 6 months. There's kind of a crop rotation theory going on of like, you want to parcel out and you can, I might say 90 days, you might say 180 days. We're kind of splitting hairs because it depends on the size of the market and how much time you're going to invest. The thing that I am concerned about when I see people designing these systems and these campaigns is trying to go at people aggressively with a fastball pitch. The fastball pitch, let me sell you some stuff. Book a meeting with me now. That burns people out. Stop doing it. It works in some cases. So I can't say conclusively stop doing it, everybody. But for the most part, it's annoying because you're just making all these assumptions. And now I'm annoyed because I'm like, no, this isn't right. Now you've emailed me with like fake news. It's not really fake news, but you know what I mean? It's you've made faulty assumptions. You've showed to me that you're not going to do your homework and that you don't understand my persona or who I am or what we're doing. And so now I'm going to discount any further emails from you. And especially if you send me 30 LinkedIn messages in 30 days, like you're getting moved to that other folder. The SDRs that are pleasantly persistent, they're still emailing me in my inbox and I'll reply to them every now and then. I get an email from Chili Piper once a quarter. It's always a good email. I'm like, I'm still not ready to buy. I'm still probably not going to buy, but you're welcome to email me back. I love those guys. They're awesome over there. I'm not going to probably use their product. I haven't used it yet, but like they have a great sales development team.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, if I said that, there's a difference in no and no reply. Great line. Great line. And in that same vein, like what I had done when I get a no, sometimes I'll ask, is it okay? It's like, thank you for letting me know. First of all, thank you for replying to me and letting me know. Is it okay if I check in with you 6 months from now and see if anything has changed? The reason you want to do that, there's two reasons. Like one, because things do change. And sometimes some people are going to respond, yes, follow up with me in 6 months. The second thing is you've now created a legitimate stream of email traffic back and forth between you and that person, which means you're going to land in their inbox the next time you email them. Yeah. So, and then, if there's no reply, right, I think in our pre-interview, you had mentioned that you guys did a test, right? Where you actually like mathematically graphed it. And after the fourth email, there's like a massive drop off in deliverability or in reply rate, because what happens is you're getting spam blocked at that point.
Yeah. I think you kind of get like, this is back, we did that 2 years ago. It's probably about 4 emails. I bet you 3 is probably the new 4 right now, but it's somewhere between 3 and 4. People's patience, and it also depends on the timing and the spacing and the quality of the email. If you're personalizing things, you probably earn yourself a few more emails. If you're just mass blasting, you're probably best at like 1 or 2.
Yes.
But you're just doing yourself a disservice because if it's not relevant, they would have replied already. So sending them 7 more emails isn't going to make it more relevant. They've already seen it. So just assume, like an ad, they didn't click on it. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
Don't nuke that account forever.
Yeah. And don't nuke your account forever. I can't tell you how many times, going to your point of if you're the first time founder or you're the first salesperson at a company and maybe you haven't done this before, if you go and you blast 1,000 people a day for 10 days or whatever. If you go and hit a lot of people with a one-off email that's not personalized, you're going to get your account shut off. And you don't like Google's not dumb. Like they remember how many times has this account been blocked for being a spammer?
Yep. And they're also very attentive to new accounts. Like yes. I heard a stat, I can't confirm it, but I'm again, it's probably directionally correct that like 90-something% of Google accounts that get created are for the purposes of spamming.
Oh, I believe it. 100%.
And if you think about it, it's called snowshoeing, and you just create, like, if you want to send 1,000 emails, you create 500 Gmail accounts, and each of them sends 2 emails, and that's how they get the traffic through.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you find yourself using the tactics that spoofers and spammers are using, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider your life choices and think about, what's a more sustainable way of doing things.
Yeah. I used to fight with it. I'm like, I'm never going to outsmart the people at Google. So why not just lean into quality over quantity? There are times and places for quantity, but
Why not
I think
both?
overall,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned an interesting piece about no reply, or there's a no and a no reply. And that there was something that you said about you'll email them again in the next 6 months. So let's assume they don't reply to you at all. How do you know when the right time to engage is, and what does that look like?
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, so it depends on the sophistication of your tech stack. So like, let's say sometimes you have access to like intent data, or sometimes you'll have access to something like that. That could be a great trigger. That's something that's available. There's a bunch of providers, self-interested. Of course, Apollo has intent data in the platform, which is my employer. For those of you who are listening who don't know, to disclaim. So maybe you can get like a piece of information about this person re-engaging. They post something on LinkedIn or whatever. I would say just going after, I think giving it enough time. Like what you're really doing is a shot in the dark. What's more important than like knowing when to re-engage? Because like the way I've done it is I don't know. I just like throw them in a sequence that starts 6 months from now. But what I do, that messaging is very different. I don't just like start over with a new first email. I actually acknowledge the fact. I'm like, hey, Bob, I tried to get in touch with you 6 months ago. Here's why. You didn't reply. I'm assuming it's because you weren't interested. Has anything changed? That's it. That's the message. And you know what? This has worked for me a bunch of times. It's worked a lot. And where you're most successful with this is at the end of a fiscal quarter, or at the start of a new fiscal year. Because a lot of times, like buyer cycles line up. This is when their agreement with the previous provider, whatever, is ending, or they're getting a new budget, like something is changing. They're going through a planning process. And so a lot of the time we'll do that. So when I was running an accounting company, it would be, we're coming into the end of the quarterly close. And so I'd be like, hey, I emailed you before, you weren't interested because you never replied to me, but I know you're going through a close right now. Like, do you need a new bookkeeper or whatever? And a lot of people would respond to that and say, actually, yes, something has changed. You'd be amazed at how many people respond and say, I'm sorry, I never got back to you before. And it's not because like they feel some obligation to me. What they're actually saying is like, I should have ditched my provider and gone to something new, and I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I never got back to you. The first one I received, I was blown away, because they genuinely were interested, and they looked at it and they saw it, and then they forgot about it. And I look at this pile of papers that I have. I get a book, I get checks that people wrote to me that I need to cash.
You got actual money sitting on your desk.
Actual money sitting. I have two. It's a long story. 2 checks.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason I can't cash them by taking a picture on my phone. It's just phone doesn't like them. I'm like, okay. I haven't gotten to those. And that's like actual money sitting on my desk. And I'm not trying to say this because I'm like, I have so much money. I'm like, this is real money. It would be meaningful. Just so busy. So like an email that's obviously less priority than cashing a check. Like, it's just because I'm not replying doesn't mean I hate you. Doesn't mean I never want to hear from you again. Doesn't mean it's not relevant.
I want to go back to where we started, like the theory of establishing a relationship. I think this is something that I failed to articulate that I'll do now. If you stay, you have to realize that taking a long view is the most profitable course of action. If you plan to stay in sales or to stay in business for any length of time, what you'll come to realize is that like that phrase "is a small world" is very true. There's not a finite number of people in your industry or in your space. So building a relationship in this fashion, like you have to be willing to think ahead, where it's not just the sequence I'm sending today, but if I build a new sequence for prospecting for today, I also am building that sequence that will fire in 6 months. And I'm going to build the trigger or the automation that will kick somebody into the new sequence at the end of the first one. And it's because I understand or I've understood over the course of my career that the most valuable thing you have as a salesperson is your book of business. And so by building that relationship, by going back to somebody 6 months later, hey, has anything changed? Like, you're giving yourself more at bats, more shots, more shots on the target, however you want to say it, to establish a relationship with somebody. And this is something that, like, I think sellers further down the funnel tend to forget as well. You get into a situation, or you get into a conversation with somebody, hey, this is what I have. Do you need it? No, they can't buy it for whatever reason. Great. And you ignore that person forever. Now, you don't want to spend a lot of time with that person because your time is valuable. You need to spend it where you're going to get money for the most part. But I like to tell a story. Maybe I told this last time about Bill Clinton. Did I talk about this? Okay.
Not that I remember.
Cool. Let me know if I'm going too crazy. So Bill Clinton, or taking us too off topic, but leading up, when Bill Clinton entered the political sphere, he started this practice where every time he would talk to somebody, he kept a Rolodex. He would enter their information right by hand in his Rolodex at the end of the day. When he ran for president, he'd been doing this for 20 years. He got out that Rolodex and he called every single person in there and he asked them if they would organize for his campaign. And so overnight, he ended up with a nationwide campaign structure because he had kept in touch with these people. It wasn't just, put them in the Rolodex, but he would call them like once a year and remember, hey, how's your daughter? How's your kid? How's your business? How's whatever? So sales is very much similar. And when you go from one job to another, when you get to a certain point as a salesperson, often the way you increase your earnings is not just by having a higher OTE because you're getting more commission. You're getting a higher base because you're bringing a book with you. And companies are going to poach you or look to bring you in because they know you have the relationships that are going to lead to the deals.
I love that. It does seem like a snowball that when you're an SDR, it fits in your hand. But as you keep pushing, the longer you spend in the industry, the more you know people and the easier it becomes to land those larger deals because you have those relationships. I remember being like early in my sales career going like, how am I going to get my foot in the door? I was trying to sell, get on approved vendor lists. And like, I had to cold call to even get in the front door, and I'd be going in there and these guys have, known each other for 20 years. I'm like, I have no chance to win here, but you have a chance to start, and you have a chance to start and make a positive impression, and especially, impress with your knowledge of the problem. You'll never know more than an engineer about their business, but you can at least know your problem space better.
Amen. Absolutely.
I want to bring us back to talking about the kind of design of the sequence. I like to just start by like opening up my CRM, taking everybody in it and throw them in the same sequence, send them all an email. Right. Obviously, just one email. Oh,
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Send it off my predictablerevenue.com domain and cross my fingers. We've talked a little bit about your thoughts on designing a sequence, and I understand you've got kind of there's the pattern of call and email, like the double tap on at the same point in time, and a voicemail. So maybe a triple, call it a hat trick if I'm feeling extra Canadian for the day. And you do that 3 times in 30 days, then you rest them. So that's kind of overall, is that a fair overall kind of sequence design?
Yes. I like to add in a LinkedIn touch. But I think the only important call out there would be, I don't tend to look to sell people over LinkedIn. I look to connect with them on LinkedIn. And that's it. A sales pitch never comes from me on LinkedIn. It's just part of the sequence because it warms up the calls and it warms up the emails.
The inner old school salesperson in me doesn't want to admit this, but I think there's a thing we can learn from the people in marketing here. I feel dirty saying this into a microphone. But there's the top of funnel content, there's bottom of funnel content. And I think with LinkedIn and with a voicemail and with a lot of emails, this is very top of funnel. You are getting them interested and aware of your name and your brand. And then at some point, you're going to go and deliver that real CTA. Nobody writes SEO pieces to try and convert you to be a customer today. It's an SEO piece about something you're tangentially interested in that might eventually lead you into this trap of, I got you. You read my content, you liked it, you subscribed, now you're my customer. I mean, that's not SEO summed up, but it's direct, it's close. And I think there's so much can be said about the LinkedIn touches. They are very, very, very top of funnel.
They're top of funnel, and they're not designed to book the meeting via LinkedIn. You also have to be judicious with who you send the connection request to because you're limited on how many you can send. but I like to work it in. Same theory. Calls warm up emails, emails warm up calls, LinkedIn connects warm up both. They all work together.
I want to get into the why behind a sequence. And I'm not sure, do we cover why, or do you want to do CTAs and kind of close the loop on writing an email? Because we talked about sort of your theory for designing writing email. What do you think fits better first?
Yeah, I think we could talk about the writing the email and maybe those component pieces. And maybe in the doing, we'll cover the why.
Okay.
So I think there's like any email, right? There's three pieces. There's your subject line, and your subject line is responsible for your open rate. There's your body copy, which is, it will impact your reply rate. But then there's your call to action, which is a part of the body copy, but I like to think of it as its own entity, and that your reply rate is largely determined on your call to action. So when I think of those three things, with the subject line, I like to try and put in what is the, what is the sum? Why am I reaching out to you? Who am I and why am I reaching out to you? Like, what is the pithiest, the most direct way that I can do it, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm selling Apollo, it might be Zoom info and outreach in one tool. If I'm, predictable revenue, I don't know, you can contribute to a subject line, but it might be like, get more meetings for your AEs without hiring an SDR, something like that. So the subject line is designed, and going back to this idea, like if I'm writing an email to the CEO of a company I work for, what is my subject line in the email? It's what is the email about? It's not like, hey, David, question about your, 401, no, it's not some constructed snippety little thing. It's like update on Q4 campaigns, right? It's like something like that email is going to get open. It's going to get read. So similar kind of approach. The body copy, when we talk about this, what you're looking to do is, who am I? Why am I reaching out to you? Why should you care? And then the call to action is like, what is my ask? And if you can do that in 3 sentences, you're in really good shape. So you've got 1 sentence for your subject line, 1 sentence for who am I, why am I reaching out to you, 1 sentence for why should you care, 1 sentence for what is the ask. And if you do that and it's that short, you're able to put each sentence on its own paragraph, which makes your email incredibly readable. And you're going to get a higher reply rate.
Subject line opens, body gets responses, CTA gets into meetings.
Absolutely.
Love that. And so when we talk about the subject line, if we start there and work our way down, this is was this the trailer analogy, or was the whole email the trailer analogy? Help me understand.
I think both. I think both play. So like the whole email is like the trailer for the demo conversation or the meeting conversation. The subject line is the trailer for the email, right? It's inception, which might be confusing if you're just listening to this. So it's a hook. It's like, think about the subject line as the part of the song that gets stuck in your head. It's the hook. It's the catchiest bit. It's the meatiest part.
And specifically, like in songwriting theory, the very, very small amount I know about, they do intentionally pick the piece that they want to stick in your head, that they feel is that hook, and they will repeat it over and over and over and over again. And they'll put a really interesting melody to it in order to inception it. How do we get melody into email?
Oh, yeah. There's, that's another podcast. I would say it's about value and benefit. It's about the benefit. So if I want to know as the opener of your email that there is something in it for me to open this email. So I can give an example. It was, when I was going back again to accounting, it was on-time closes every month. That was important. That was a benefit to the buyer. For you guys, like more meetings every month. I mean, might be the benefit. That might be washed out or played out. So maybe that won't work. I'm not giving you specific copy advice if you're listening to this. I'm trying to give you the theory of like, what is the core benefit that you're reaching out to them? And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. I get this all the time. I mean, people reach out to me and they're like, Joshua, are you looking for more content help? Like, where's the benefit in that? You're just asking me a question. Like, no, I don't want your help, right? If you were to write an email to me that's like, I can, your blog post on prospecting is 53 on Google. I can get you to number 1. I may be way more likely to open that email, right? Because it's very specific and there's a clear benefit outlined. Now, the body copy better deliver on the promise of that hook or that teaser, but that's going to get opened.
Yeah. And I love the hook. If we're using the boxing analogy, like there's the jab and the hook. The two work together. The whole email has to flow. The bait and switch of like a sales process where I ended up on the call with somebody who was trying to sell me and I didn't realize it. You can do the very same thing with your email and it's going to get tons of opens and none responses because it's a bait and switch, right? If I send an email that says like 911 emergency from your kid's school or something like that, it's going to get a strong open rate.
Yeah.
People can be choked when they realize it's a prospecting email.
Yeah, it better be about their kid at school, right? There was an SDR. I think I told you the story. Like there was an SDR who was using this line. He called somebody, be like, "Hey, Kyle, how are you today?" They're like, "I'm busy." Like, "I got something that could change your life." Okay, now everybody was like, "Go on," right? Because who hasn't dreamed like that lotto ticket I bought actually won, and like they're calling me, or I won Publishing Clearinghouse. Yeah, when you go and hit them with your B2B SaaS pitch after that, you're getting hung up on. You're getting some angry folks.
If you call me and say that, you better be a serial killer that's like coming after me, or I'm going to be disappointed.
Am I on Punked? Where's Ashton? Right? Like there's got to be something good there. It's a 2000s reference for the kids out there.
That'd be funny if we like cameoed him to Zoom Bob. So the hook grabs the attention. It is the setup for the body. And so talk to me about how do you see writing the body?
Yeah. So again, brevity is key. Who am I? Why am I reaching out? Why should you care? And what is the ask? So yeah, you were going to ask something.
No. I was just thinking, geez, that's a lot to fit into one line.
It's a lot to fit into one line. But
simplicity
is key, right? So it's like, hey, Colin, I'm Josh. I own a software that helps salespeople sell more. I know you run a sales company. So that's who am I? Why am I reaching out to you? Okay. Why should you care? I know you run a sales company. I think there's more money you're leaving some money on the table. Ooh, I'm leaving money on the table. That's why I care about. What is my ask? Are you looking to get more from your sales reps? So this is where people often go wrong. I don't always have that first, the CTA is not always the meeting. Like, are you looking to get more from your sales reps this quarter? That's a valid CTA. It doesn't always have to be, do you have 15 minutes tomorrow for us to chat? I would so much rather have somebody be like, yes, I am looking to get more. And then I'd be like, great, let me tell you how I can do that for you. Here's a link to my calendar. Let's find some time. When are you free? I've established a relationship. I didn't go in straight asking for the meeting, which can be a valid move, like A/B test, find out. But I've had a lot of success just trying to get the reply in that first email. The meeting can come later.
It's such an underrated move. Everybody's going for, I want to book a meeting on the first email. I know I only have a few emails. It's like in the AE that does the premature demo. They just whip their deck out on the first, like on the first call.
Yes.
Hey, welcome to my sales room. Let me show you everything. And it's like, gee, I don't want to see all that. Put it away. Let's have a conversation. Show me like the two slides that I want to see. And it's kind of the same thing with the email. It's like, let me at least understand if this piece is relevant to you. And if it is, it's great. And then the advantage here is if you're not coming in with the fastball, you're not throwing a fastball at somebody. It's a much easier yes to reply to next time. I haven't actually done a test on this, but I can say anecdotally that approach we did the soft ask piece, which gets 3x the replies, not necessarily 3x the meetings, but I guarantee if you did the crop rotation and you're kind of resting the list well enough, I would be shocked if it didn't produce more replies in the long run.
It's been my experience.
Love it. All right. So we're talking about the body. Who am I? Why should I care? What is the ask? I like how that's kind of a flexible enough. Like, I love the challenge of can you get it down to one? If people are listening, there's a great presentation by Patrick. I forgot his last name, called Kill a Word. If you need some inspiration when you're writing your next email, just flip through this presentation. After the first 10 slides, you'll get it. And then I kind of flip through that once or twice a year. It's worthwhile.
Yeah. And I'll check that out. I haven't heard of it. The last thing I'd say on this is if I can give an example of like, imagine you get an email, or the subject line is job at SpaceX. Body copy is, Josh, I'm Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX. I saw your resume. I think you'd be a good fit to work here. Do you have time to talk tomorrow? That's like a 1 sentence or maybe a 2 sentence email. You're gonna respond. You'll be like, yeah, for sure. Can you get your sales email to be like that? That short, that clear, to the point, direct, and enticing? Like, if so, you're gonna get responses. You're gonna get meetings.
I love that. It kind of brings us naturally to because the body is the setup for the call to action. The two have to be one and the same. We've talked a lot about the soft ask versus the fastball. So let's just put a bow on how to write that first email piece. What are your thoughts on this call to action? We're going for relevance, relationship, confirmation of, did you get the email? Like, how do you think about that CTA on the first email?
Yeah. The CTA, first of all, it's got to be on its own line. Like, don't bury the lead here. Don't put your question you're asking up somewhere in the middle of the body copy. It's the last thing in the email. It's on its own paragraph. It's one short line. It shouldn't bleed into 2 lines. The way that I think about this is it has to be a clear ask. Whatever your ask is, make it very clear. Make it very easy to reply to. And that's how you're going to get, more success. So I don't want to come out here and be like, never go ask for the meeting, or, because I think there are times where asking for a meeting would make sense, depending on what's in the email. I don't want to say like, oh, never go for the soft ask. Like, you're going to test and optimize your way to what's the most successful, and that will change over time as well. So I would say, like, try both, but keep that short, keep it easy to respond to, and you're going to have better results.
Love it. We've built this 3, maybe, let's say we got it down to 2 lines. We've got a call to action in there. You mentioned earlier a follow-up. So how do we talk to me? I know we've talked about this a little bit. So talk to me about how you build a follow-up, your first follow-up on that. And then what does that third email look like?
Yeah. So the first follow-up replies in the same thread. So you're getting the juice of your great subject line again. You're not starting a new thread. They're also, because your email is so short, if you think about this, like, I think the majority of email traffic is read, or the majority of emails are opened on mobile. I think more replies tend to come from desktop, but a lot of people have their work email on their phone and they're open their email on their phone. So you want your whole thread to live on one swipe on their phone. And so in order to do that, that reply email should be 1 sentence. That's where I've had the best success, is in the 1 sentence. And what I do there, is I kind of restate the call to action. So whatever the call to action was, it comes back again in the second email. And this is where I get the most response. So, if your first ask was, is this something you're looking for? The second email's line would be like, hey, Colin, hope you're doing well. Just make this easy on you. Do you need what I have? Are you looking for X? Right? Is this on your radar at all? Something like that. People tend, a lot of times they're going to say no. You're going to get a 1-word response. No. A lot of the times they're going to be like, yeah, let's chat. Bam, there you got it.
Great. And so, very short. This is the following week. So assuming the first email was week 1, this is week 2. What does week 3 look like from an email perspective?
Yeah. So week 3 is a new thread, new subject line. And this is going to be kind of similar to the first email. Now, it depends on the approach that you're taking. I tend to prefer having a smaller list of accounts that I'm working into by multi-threading people. So if you're doing that, like, what I'll tend to do is I try and make it obvious that I've tried to get in touch with them. You're going to incite a little bit of guilt in this third email. So third email is a new subject line, same theory as the first email subject line. But then I'm going to get in there and be like, hey, Colin, I've tried to get in touch with you. Maybe if I've spoken to a couple of their colleagues, I'll name drop them. But like, hey, Colin, I've tried to get in touch with you. I talked to Gray and I talked to Julian. They both said that we should chat. And so now I'm going back to that theory of that. What's the first email? Who am I? Why am I reaching out to you? Why should you care? So, hey, Colin, I chatted with your friends and they said we should talk. That's why I should care. Right. And now I'm going in to ask, to make my ask again. I'm going to restate the value, what the benefit is to you and why you should care. So it's like, hey, Colin, hope you're doing well. I chatted with Gray, chatted with Julian. They said we should chat. because my software is 10 times better than what you're using now. Is this something you're open to talking about? And then the most underrated thing that you can do in my experience in sales is try and make somebody laugh. So I'll drop a PS. I'll be like, PS, I'm assuming you haven't replied to me yet because you're, I don't know. I try to make it funny. You can get off the wall here. I'll say things like, so you're on vacation in Aruba. There's a woman there. Her name is Vivian. She'll know who I am. Just tell her I said hello or whatever. Like tell her I'm coming back for her. I'll say something crazy. And people will respond and they'll laugh and they'll reply back to me and be like, I didn't, and when I see Vivian next, like you'll get a little thread going there. And this again goes back to like, it's about more than just trying to book the meetings, about trying to build the relationship. Coming across as funny immediately cuts through the noise of their email inbox. Like, hey, this is funny. This person did their homework. I'll reply here.
I did a podcast with Scott Barker he was Sales Hacker at the time. Now he's Outreach. Now he's GTM Fund, I think. And he had one of his favorite follow-ups was basically the same setup, couldn't reach you. And the funny bit was, so I'm going to role play with myself, our cold call.
Nice.
Ring. Here's my script. And then he's putting in these hilarious answers for how the prospect would. And like, if I received that, I would be laughing so hard. You would definitely get a reply, probably get a meeting. I love the creativity there.
Yeah, you can't beat it. And at this point, you've called them twice, you've emailed them twice, you've maybe connected with them on LinkedIn. This is for now, for the next 6 months. This is your last swing. So, swing for the fences. Get weird with it. Not too weird. Don't get like super weird, but like you get funny with it.
Send my love to Vivian.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Of the three, and this is this is one of those, like, if you are actually emailing the other two people, you have the opportunity to personalize. This is one of those opportunities where if you are a volume approach, you don't have this opportunity. If you're going for a more efficiency or conversion oriented approach, then you have the ability to do all these things, like make all these calls, like call their coworkers, like to try and find ways of making that email more. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of like do I personalize, do I not personalize? I'm curious though, which of the three emails is going to get the most replies?
In my experience, email 2 gets the most replies, then email 3, and then email 1.
I would have thought it would be email 1 and then kind of falling off.
That's what I thought as well. But time after time after time, and again, this is just like my method. There are other methods out there. I think other people have other theories, but using this structure, it's that second email being one sentence, replying into the thread where they can see what the first email was. That gets the most responses. The laugh that they get from the PS at the third email is, gets the second most. And then I don't know. I very rarely respond to a first cold email that I get. And I think that kind of makes sense.
That's fair. I hear there's a rumor on the street that it might be a vicious one, that you actually kill trees in order to come up with these emails. Is that true?
You're not wrong. So yeah, when I actually start writing these emails, I do it here. I do it with one of these. I'm a big Moleskine fan. I have a fountain pen.
Same book.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. So I was just talking with one of my the writers on my team now is like every opportunity that you have to edit something, to rewrite something is going to make it better. So I like to start pen and paper, no distractions. My computer monitor is off, not Slack. There's no email or whatever. I'm not on my phone. I actually draft out the structure of the sequence and then I write it. I write every email, subject line, body, call to action. Once I have that in a good place, then I will open up my computer and I'll typically the next day, sleep on it. Typically the next day, I'll transcribe it. And the process of transcription is an editing process as well. So I typically make edits as I'm putting it, into that new format on the computer screen. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I typically edit, I send it to myself. I open it on my desktop. I open it on my phone. I'll typically make another round of edits. And then I kind of, lock it, put it into the sequencing tool I'm using, put it into Apollo, and then you're ready to go.
Got it. I love that process. The thing I was thinking on is we talked about how to write an email. The why, and I like that we started there because it kind of provides you with physical steps of how to write an email. In your case, you go cut down a tree, you turn it into paper and pulp and all that, fountain pen. Love to take a step back and talk about why. Like, how do you decide on the why behind a sequence? Kind of who's going in, which benefit? Because if I'm going to VP of sales, let's say I'm selling Apollo, I can go and talk to them about their sales development team. I could talk to them about their account executive team. I could talk to them about their account management team. So those are just three kind of different use cases and one persona, right? I could go to the marketing person and kind of offer there's similar jobs to be done, but it's a very different purpose, a different obstacle. There's so many different combinations of ways that I could structure this coming from Apollo, going after one particular sales org. So how do you come up with that why behind the sequence of, okay, it's going to be these individuals, this set of individuals, I'm going to talk about this specific benefit. I'm going to write that benefit statement in this particular way.
Yeah, this is the nitty gritty, right? This is like where rubber meets the road, and you can talk theory all day, but can you actually put numbers on the leaderboard? So I'll start with maybe the middle or the last question, which was like who to put in the sequence. So what I actually do, I'll give you two answers. One is assuming you're coming into a company that has a little bit of an established process and has a customer base. And the other one will be if you're starting from scratch. So assuming you're coming into an existing company, get into the CRM. And I go through and I look at all the deals that have been closed won in this quarter or in last quarter. And I'll look at who signed the agreement. I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. Because often the person that you're actually trying to book a meeting with may not be the person who signs the agreement. But if you don't get the person who signs the agreement involved in the selling process, like early enough, you may not be able to get the deal through the door. So, or like maybe there's a common belief. I've seen this a lot of time. There's like, who are you getting your information from, right? There's a common belief at a lot of organizations that maybe your ICP is one person, but you go and look at who signed the deals for that quarter, and it's always a different kind of person. Like, that's actually the buyer. That's actually who I'm going after. So I look at who signs the agreement, and then separately, I look at who do we communicate with most throughout the sales process. So I'm trying to answer that question, like, who are the stakeholders? What are their titles? What are their personas? How do they interact with each other? Is it a different person signing from the person we communicated with most? Is it the same person? And then that kind of gives me a map of who am I going to put into the account, the sequence, and also what is the structure of the team at this kind of company that we're selling to, right? So from there, you're going to come away with some personas. I got my economic buyer, who's the person who's signing the agreement. I've got my champion, who's the person I'm talking to the most, who's kind of moving through the process. And then I have these maybe influencers who popped in. They were there for one meeting or one email thread or whatever, but they were more tangential to the deal. I think the thing to know is that if you want to be really, really, really successful, you need to have a sequence for economic buyers, a sequence for champions, and a sequence for influencers. And the asks to those three people are different, and the way you approach them are different, but they all kind of work in harmony to get that deal across the line.
Love that. And so that's if you're going, and I'm just picturing you, and I know I said this in the pre, but I'm picturing like evil Jason laughing at all the sucker AEs at his new company who haven't touched anybody in 90 days. And you set that rule that if close last date equals greater than 90 days, add them to my sequence, and just profiting off of this huge commission check off of other people's laziness.
I have a name for that sequence, actually. I call it Wake the Dead. So that's my that's a play that I run over and over again. I'm going to go wake up all these dead deals. And sometimes you get a lot of money from that.
I've been selling into salespeople a lot. We will do the same thing, but we sell to salespeople. VPs of sales have short tenures. And so if it's been more than a couple of years, we enrich that with a net new set of people change jobs all the time. Following 100%. Those people to new places, we do that too. But also the Wake the Dead campaign, I like to, we wake the dead accounts. So big fan of that. If we're not going into the Wake the Dead campaign, if we're going at, pure cold, the hardest, most pure form of the outbound arts, where do we start?
Well, to be clear, I'm still going cold, but I'm looking at who to go after based on previous deals. But are you asking I'm coming into a company where there is no history and I'm going?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So you're starting with this is how you're coming up with the buyer personas and the individuals you're targeting, not specifically just for your Wake the Dead campaign.
Yes, exactly. This
Got
is
it.
how I do that, because what I have found is that, like, maybe you'll go through a training process. What the trainer tells you may not be true. What the product marketer tells you may not be true. Go look at the deals in Salesforce. Go look at who signed the agreement. Who do you communicate with? Like, that's who your buyer personas are, because that's the data. It's not somebody's interpretation of the data. It's your understanding of the actual data. And then from there, that's how I actually go cold. So if there's 20 deals closed in the previous quarter, of those 20 deals, 15 were signed by the VP of marketing. Of those, and 5 were signed by the VP of sales. I'm like, okay, I have 2 potential economic buyers. The most valuable is VP of marketing. So I'm going to focus there, right? And then it's like, okay, who was the champion? Well, if it was the head of demand gen, that's, my champion persona. So I'm kind of mapping the accounts out based on what's closed. And then I'm building my sequences and prospect list accordingly.
Got it. And so when we take all of that, we start with who's the first one you build the sequence for? Which the persona, the economic decision maker, the champion, the influencer? Where do you kind of start there?
Yeah. So what you don't want to do is hit all 3 of those people on the same day at the same time. That is a great way to look like a spoofer with the same email, right? That's a great way to be exactly indistinguishable from a spoofer or a spammer, and you're going to get locked down really fast.
Side note,
yeah.
This is something that I think maybe a lot of non-technical sales development reps might miss. There is something called a catch-all at Predictable Revenue. If you send an email to, hey, Colin, I love your hat. That looks pretty cool at predictablerevenue.com. It's going to go to, it might break the character limit, but something like that will come to me. It'll come to because I set up our instance of Gmail. I have the catch-all email, but I'm an abnormal CEO. Do you know who the person that handles the catch-all email is in most organizations? It's the IT guy.
Yeah.
And do you know who hates spam? Do you know who hates cold email more than anybody else in the entire world? That person right there. 100%. So if you want, like, if you want to make sure that you're gonna nuke your domain, send 5 of the same email on the same day to that, because the IT person's going to see that and be like, how do you think your domain gets on a blacklist? Right. It's some IT person went and copy pasted your email, submitted it to the SORBS blacklist. That's how you get on there. So
yeah, it's a painful wake up experience, right? When you, like, I think a lot of people do this when they discover sales engagement, automated outreach for the first time. They think they're a genius and they're like, bam, I'm going to go blast all these 20 people or 200 people today. And yeah, you get shut down. Okay. So to answer your question, prioritize the champion first. That's who I go to first. Next is the economic buyer and then the influencer. And so just at a really high level, your champion is your person that you want to meet with, you want to talk to. I'm going to hit them on, let's call it like day 1. I'm going to stagger that. This is what we call, by the way, for those of you listening, this is what we call multi-threading. So I'm going into an account and I'm going into the account in multiple ways, multiple different people. So I'm going to hit, let's say it's a Monday. I hit my economic buyer on a Monday. The following Tuesday, I hit the champion on a Monday. The following Tuesday, a week and 1 day later, I might hit the economic buyer. And my messaging there is, I'm only going to hit them. And like, there's a little bit of trickiness here. You have to be savvy with automation. If your champion replies to you, you don't necessarily want to go to the economic buyer. But if they don't reply, you can go to the economic buyer and be like, hey, Colin, I've been trying to get in touch with Gray about this thing, and he's not replying to me. Should I be reaching out to you instead? That's the ask. That's it. That's all the question is. And now you've created this dynamic where what's most likely going to happen is they're not going to respond to you. They're going to forward your email to their subordinate, who is your champion, who you've been trying to get in touch with. And that person's going to be like, oh my God, my boss is on my ass about this. They're going to reply to you. Then the third person, I'll stagger maybe a few days after the economic buyer, same kind of deal. If either the economic buyer or the champion replied, you don't need to hit this person up, but this is an influencer. And so if you go back to that process I talked about, where I started the company, I get in the CRM and I look for who is involved in these deals. Your influencer is the person who had one reply into the thread on an email chain that's like 27 emails long. And they just didn't want to look like a complete non-entity. So they reply and be like, yeah, I think this is a good idea. Like, that person's involved in these conversations internally, but they're not the buyer. The ask to that person is, who's the right person for me to reach out to? So you're almost playing mind games here. I know they're not the right person. I'm intentionally reaching out to you because they're not the right person. But I also know that they're probably going to tell me or forward my email to the person who is, and that person's going to respond to me.
And secret trick of sales development that a lot of people I find is super underrated because it doesn't make sense and it shouldn't work. Email, if you're going for a VP sales, email the VP of marketing, email the VP of customer success, email every other VP, be like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit lost. Would you mind, like, who's the person that handles this? And they're like, it's obviously the VP of sales. And you're like, oh, cool. And that's Josh. And yeah, okay. And then now you've got a reply from that domain. Again, like you said, you're more likely to get a reply, another reply. Google looks for engagement. Yes. All else, everything else aside, they're straight up looking for, do people open when you send an email, do they open it? Do they reply? Do they click on links, etc.? I love that different CTAs or different purposes behind the different buying influences really rings true to my Miller Hyman upbringing.
Yeah. Wait, Miller Hyman. What is this? Is that a sales methodology? Did I just offend you? Okay.
I was like, did I say it wrong? Herman Miller? No, Miller Hyman. There was a book from the 80s called The New Strategic Selling.
Okay. Got it.
It's like the grandfather of in my opinion, grandfather of the sales books. I think it predates Sandler by a little bit.
It's well, I was recently reading a book called Scientific Advertising, which was written in the 20s by the guy who did the first, I believe he was the first marketer or advertiser for Goodyear tires, and also for like a variety of other major like General Mills, like a huge brands that are still dominant today. And it's incredible what he talked about 100 years ago is absolutely still true. And today, the only thing that's changed is the medium of, he was doing newspaper advertising primarily and direct mail type stuff. It's all still true. It's just, on the internet or maybe not. I don't know. Direct mail's worked for me in the past.
I bet you direct mail would be even more effective now than it would, or than it did back in the day. Yeah, I used to do direct mail. That was a long time ago, but that's how I got into mail merges.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Doing it in what was it? Word and Excel 95 back in the day.
I have I ran this direct mail campaign I have an example of it that blew people's minds. There's this company this was written by a robot.
That's awesome.
This appears to be entirely handwritten, and the robot drags a pen across paper. So it's to any discerning eye, it looks exactly like a person wrote this. And basically, it's just a letter, and the letter just says, it's like a cold email. It's like, hey, I'm Dustin, the CEO of Building Connected, and this is why I'm calling you, or I'm writing to you. Call this phone number. I'd love to chat with you. All of a sudden, our SDRs started getting phone calls, and because I didn't tell them, I didn't tell all of them that I was doing this. And they're like, hey, Dustin, you emailed, you wrote me a letter in the mail. I got your letter. It's got a forever stamp on it. Like, it looks exactly just like mail.
That's awesome.
That was epic.
Oh, big fan. Huh.
Yeah.
So much better than the LinkedIn boxes, I think.
It's much better. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking, how do you come up with the hypothesis of the sequence? We talked about how you kind of segment it between the economic buyer, the champion, and the real message is going to be to that champion, that user buyer, right? And so how do you decide, kind of pulling the Apollo instance or the Apollo example? Okay, we're going to a VP of sales. I'm assuming that's your kind of primary target, or maybe a director of sales development kind of individual. How do you decide if you're going to go with like the efficiency approach? Hey, I want to, like, what benefit? How do you decide on the benefit, which is kind of the hypothesis of the sequence?
Yeah, it's so tough. For me, it's really about if you're explaining to your grandma, what is the most colloquial way to explain the benefit of the thing that you have? So, and maybe you have multiples, right? Like Apollo, it's a complicated product. It's got sales intelligence, it's got sales engagement, there's automation. There's a bunch of different ways you can go at it. But if you've done your homework and you went through all those deals and maybe you've gotten into Gong and you've listened to some calls, like you should start to pick up on the language of like what people respond to and not just what they respond to, but how do they talk? This is something I learned early in my sales career. I was literally selling. Oh, is everything good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was literally selling credit repair services to broke people who had no credit. They couldn't get approved for a loan. So they get transferred to me and to try and, sell them on something to help fix their credit. And what I found is that like everybody talked about credit differently. Some people called a loan a note. And if they said, I fell behind on my note and I said, oh, so you fell behind on your loan. What that told them was like, this guy doesn't know me. He doesn't understand what I'm talking about because he used a different word. Words mean the same thing. That's true if you're selling to CEOs or if you're selling to broke people who have, problems with their credit. So with Apollo, what I lead for is like, what is the most relevant benefit? And for me, as somebody who's implemented sales engagement and sales intelligence tools, it's like, listen, I'm going to save you money, consolidate your tech stack with better data and give you better data. Those are like kind of three things, but no matter who I'm selling to, it's like, hey, listen, like, I got better data. It's going to consolidate the number of tools in your stack and it's going to save you some money. Is that something you're interested in? Again, that's my ask, right? It's not, do you have a meeting? Are you interested in that? I don't know, man. A lot of VPs is like, they may respond, you'd be like, no, I'm locked in with my buyers. I'm not, or with my vendors and I'm not going to change. But like a fair number of them are going to be like, actually, I'm under pressure to spend less money and get more results. And my sales ops guy is always complaining that he's overworked and like, let's talk.
As the CEO, I only heard save me money. And I was like,
yeah, exactly.
Yes, Gray, go for it.
Yeah. I think that's always a winner. If you can explain to somebody how you're going to save them money. And if you can do that across 3 vectors, I'm going to save you money by reducing inefficiency in your status quo. I'm going to save you money by costing you less than the tool that you're using. And I'm going to save you money by making you money. And if you have an explanation for each of those 3 things, like that's a win.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. And picking the right one to highlight. I see what you're saying. And because you're segmenting out, you've got basically one benefit for each one.
Yes.
So like CEO, economic person's getting the economic benefit.
Right.
Users getting it. User champions getting the champion. Got it. Love it. I want to, we've talked about multi-threading. The last thing I think we wanted to talk about was kind of a list approach versus an account approach.
Yep.
Because it kind of sets the context of how you're going to work things, how you're going to design things. There's one way where you say, hey, I'm going to take a list of people that are Wake the Dead campaign people from my CRM, throw it in. That's a list. That's great. If you're at that SDR from the beginning of the episode that has 40,000 greenfield accounts, don't do accounts. Don't do account based. Just go for it. I mean, within reason. Don't send 40,000 emails in a week. That'd be bad.
Yeah.
But calibrate. So how do you think about kind of a list-based approach versus an account-based approach? And maybe talk to me about how you see, what are your definitions for each of those?
Totally. So
and we'll try and land this.
Yeah, we'll bring it home. Okay. So I'll start by saying, I think this is the hardest. If you're totally greenfield, you don't have historical data that you can base off of. You're trying to figure it out. This is, I think, where predictable revenue, this is a lot of the work you guys do, if I understand correctly, right? This is why companies come to you. Okay, so if you're in that position, basically what you have is you have competing hypotheses because you don't have a lot of data. So I have a product that I could sell to any number of people and across these different personas. So that's the first answer to your question. I create buckets of personas. So I'm like, if you know already that only VPs of sales are going to buy your thing, like, okay, you don't have to do that. And so how do I target? I think you can start to look at things like, are they hiring for roles that are similar to, that are like people who are going to interact with my tool? Or, there's often, if they're hiring for SDRs, it's because they need more meetings. And if you're selling a thing that gets people more meetings or a service, like that's an indicator. If they're hiring marketing ops, they need ops help. You can follow that line. But if you don't have that, even what I've always done is so you're testing basically is what you're doing. And so I go and I say, okay, well, I can tell you one thing right now. If you put everybody into the same sequence, it's not going to work that good. It's going to be bad for you. So I will go and create, all right, this buyer could be any of these 5 personas. Maybe it could be the head of demand gen. It could be the head of performance marketing, it could be the VP of marketing, it could be the CRO, it could be the VP of sales, whatever. I'll create my 5 personas. I'll build 5 lists. I'll build 5 sequences, and then I'll test them one after the other. And what you're looking for here is just this is when people say sales is a numbers game. They very rarely approach it this way, but this is the right answer. Which of those sequences got me the most money? Which of those lists got me the most money, right? And you're going to narrow in on your persona. And then from there, you should have enough data to go a layer deeper, which is, okay, I was able to narrow in on the head of demand gen as the persona. Now, of all those heads of demand gen that I hit up, let's look at the distribution. At what size company was I most likely to land a meeting? And now you're going to be able to, as often in sales, elimination is the name of the game. I don't want 40,000 greenfield accounts. That's bad. You want to get rid of as many of those as possible. Focus in on who are the top 100, who are the top 1,000, who are the top 10,000. And you chip away at that like a sculptor with a bit of marble, in big chunks at first, and then finer and finer and finer over time.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm trying to make this not a promo for Outreach or for Apollo, but like one of the things that I really appreciated about Apollo that we used to do manually with all the other tools was those, I can see them, those like charts of like who's responding. Like that was having the engagement data and the full data set integrated into one. I know you can do it with Outreach and Salesforce, but it was just hard to get it to work reliably. I never could do it. Even we had sales ops. So I love that kind of piece.
It's magic.
To your point though, you're right. It's about narrowing down and getting to that perfect list of your accounts that you're going to work and you're going to invest a whole lot of time into.
Yes. Yeah. And there, that then is going to get you back into where we started the conversation, which is like, I know who I'm going after. I know the theory behind my sequence structure. Now you're going to enter into the long tail of, as a practitioner, going after these people with this structure of sequence. What is the right combination of subject line, body copy, and CTA? And you're going to optimize. And maybe we can land it here. We talk about like what's possible. So I've been able in a 3 call, 3 email outbound sequence at the sequence level to get 40 to 50% reply rate. So one way or another, I was able to get a yes or a no out of half the people that I went after. And that was over the course of maybe like 6 months of tinkering. To me, that was a win. That's a big win. I don't know that was a few years ago. I don't know that kind of number is as possible today, given all the advancements in email service providers and everything. But I think you can get somewhere close.
Love it. The only thing that I have to add to the metrics is I think so much of when you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, hey, can I replicate what Josh was doing here? What is the context of my company? Am I a brand new company with greenfield accounts? Am I selling copiers into an old industry? Am I somewhere in between? I can guarantee you that if you are like when Uber launched Uber Everything, as it was called, their reply rates were bananas. Just insane. They had like 60, 80% response rates, did 30% meeting booking rates. Those bananas. Think about that. You email 100 people and 37 would agree to and commit and hold a meeting. I've never seen numbers like that. Zenefits maybe had bonkers numbers, but they were sending millions of emails back in the day. I just wanted to add the context of you need to understand the product market fit, the kind of positioning plays a role in these stats. So.
Amen. Yeah. What I would say is if you've done everything that I talked about and more, maybe you're smarter than I am, or you're better at this than I am, which is of course possible, maybe even likely, and it's still not working, change companies. It's your product. And even more than brevity in terms of an indicator of whether you get a reply or a positive reply is product market fit. Do you have a thing? And that's the whole theory. Do you need what I want, what I have? If everyone says no, don't quit trying to sell that thing. Nobody needs it. Go do something else.
The number one cause of death of a startup?
What's that?
Premature scale. It's investing in go-to-market dollars before they have strong product market fit. And they waste money on inefficient salespeople. And I'm not saying this to say anything bad about the salespeople, but the salespeople cannot be inefficient going after the markets that the companies are asking them to go after because they don't have strong product market fit or a strong position or a strong offering given the market.
Yep. Amen.
So grains of salt, when you hear us talk about reply rates and all this great success, like take into consideration the context that we were working these accounts and working for these companies. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have you back another time.
It was such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Colin, and talk to you soon. Take care.
Sounds good. See everybody next week.